Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing my full in-depth review of 73 Yards. Now this episode was unlike any other we've had before and it's quite hard to sum up, but I did enjoy it nonetheless. So without no further ado, let's get into the review and see what my thoughts are. So normally I'd start off by talking about the Doctor, but the Doctor themselves, as you know, weren't exactly in this at all really, except the opening and closing scene. So there's not a great deal to say about Ncuti himself and his performance, but the credit really does have to go for Millie for her performance in this episode because she did phenomenally well, considering this was her first days of filming and she was only 18 at the time. She really carried the story well and she just did so well, so all the praise for the performance has to go to Millie Gibson this week. It was nice for the opening scene to have the actual TARDIS materialisation sound and you open the episode to the TARDIS materialisation. Just a nice little touch that I really love. I really love seeing and hearing the TARDIS dematerialise and materialise. So that was a nice touch for me at the opening. And if you were paying attention closely, you would have seen the names like Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson in the corners, showing that we weren't actually going to get the title sequence. But I thought that played quite well because it gave the story more room to sort of breathe, which was really good because it was such an unusual episode. So I do actually like how they didn't include the opening titles in this episode this week. I don't know if I was the only one for this, but does anyone else think it was kind of weird thinking about the Doctor wing behind the TARDIS? Because for me, I just can't see the Doctor doing that or the Doctor doing that at all. It's a bit like sleep. The Doctor says that they do sleep, but most of the time it's them themselves who actually stay awake. So for me, it felt really odd. I don't know if I want to know what everyone else thinks, but for me, it was just weird to think of the Doctor doing that. And I just thought, what, when she said that? So I don't know. For me, it's just a weird thing to think about and for the Doctor to actually do. But there we go. A thing that was never explored in the episode, which I was quite surprised at, was when Ruby would never worked out what the woman was actually signing or trying to say. I just feel like that wasn't ever explored. Now, Ruby herself, she did well in the episode to try and work out what to do, but she never actually tried to work it out. And for me, and I'm sure it was a lot for you guys as well, early on I was trying to wonder and work out what she was actually signing, what she was actually saying, but Ruby never seemed to sort of want to work out or try to work out what she's actually signing, because I would have thought that would have been sort of a clue to who she is or how to stop her. So for me, that was quite surprising that they never explored that in the episode. Now, watching it the second time round, the story seems to move a lot faster than it did in the first one, which is a shame because I do want to sort of hang around and sort of get answers, but it is a lot quicker the second time round. But something I noticed the first time round as well was I think Ruby was a bit too quick to assume that a strange woman was behind the Doctor's disappearance. Because yeah, she's strange and sort of odd, but there was nothing to say at the beginning that she was the reason the Doctor disappeared. And even then, there was no explanation as to why the Doctor disappeared. So I thought Ruby was slightly too quick to go into that opinion. But apart from that, again, Ruby herself, the character, did really well in the episode trying to work things out on her own and sort of live her life with this woman. So I thought, except those things, Ruby did extremely well. One thing which really got me in the episode is I felt you could really feel how alone and lost Ruby was. It first hit me when she was on the hills all on her own. It was starting to get dark, she was lost, it was cold, the Doctor had gone, she was just so far from home as well. I just felt like you could really feel it. So that's what I really liked. And another thing which was really sad and you could really feel was when her mother locked her out. Now that was such an incredibly sad scene, and that was probably the saddest scene of them all, where she said even her real mum didn't want her. That was just incredibly sad, and I really felt for Ruby. So what this story did really well was sort of help you to really feel how lost and alone Ruby was. Again, we had the appearance of Susan Twist, and this time Ruby actually not only interacted with her, but actually recognised her. Now, this could be from the concert, but I feel like it's more likely from the AI ambulance. So that was quite interesting how Ruby sort of started to notice who she was. Now, Susan Twist herself, I've got to say, you could really tell, amplified by the music as well, but you could really tell when she sort of started to get scared of Ruby and ran away from her, because you could just sort of see the moment where she gets startled, looks at Ruby and runs away. So I thought that was quite a great physical movement that she did, and she did really well. But it's interesting to see that Susan Twist is now starting to be recognised by the main cast as well. So again, we're only a few weeks away, but I'm looking forward to finding out more answers about Susan. I have sort of just briefly touched upon this a moment ago, but again, another great thing about the episode was the music, and actually when Ruby was approaching the pub, I also felt like it just really did remind me of the music that was sort of playing when they was going in the service tunnels in Rise of the Cybermen / Age of Steel. I don't know why, but it just really reminded me of that, so that was sort of a nice callback. Even though it was an accidental one, it was a nice callback for me. The pub scenes were a great addition as well. This was quite obviously deliberate, but even the preview clips, I felt like they gave us these preview clips to misdirect us into thinking this episode was something when it was not. So I do like how we were sort of tricked into being believed into something else was going on, like Ruby in the episode herself. Now, these people in the pub, they were obviously deliberately rude, but I really didn't like them because they were just so incredibly rude to Ruby. And yeah, poor Ruby having to deal with them being so unwelcoming. But yeah, they were just really rude, really horrible, and I didn't like them. For a second on the first watch, I did generally think Ruby slipped back in time because they did well to sort of pretend that they didn't know how you could pay with your phone. And for a second I thought, oh, has Ruby gone back in time? But then, of course, they were just playing a trick on her once again. And also, can we just say, she says last of the big spenders, yet it's £5 for a Coke. I mean, that is just crazy. This episode really did give me the vibes of the Curse of Clyde Langer, starting when she sort of got kicked out of the pub and then when she got kicked out of her own home. And again, when they sort of talked to the woman, they turned against Ruby. Again, another thing like the Curse of Clyde Langer. So these were sort of nice sort of things that sort of a link to it. And it was nice to see this sort of thing happen in Doctor Who itself. Something which I feel pops up accidentally each week is this sort of timeline of what's going on. Again, Ruby travelled in the TARDIS for 6 months in the Devil's Cord, yet in Boom it was her first alien planet. Now in this episode she says she hasn't actually travelled with the Doctor long and that maybe he does this deliberately, leaving his companions. So for me it just feels very odd how in the Devil's Cord it was 6 months, but now she's saying she hasn't travelled with him for a long time. It just feels very confusing. So again, the timelines seem very messed up. Some people just think the episodes are being moved around, which I think personally is what's happened. And some people believe it might have something to do with the story. I also feel it might have something to do with the story. But for me, it just feels very messed up with what's going on. And I do hope there's an explanation because these things just seem very messed up. On the Doctor's behalf as well, I do generally think it's sad that Ruby thinks this is something the Doctor does. Because this isn't the Doctor, and although, yeah, he does leave the companions, he wouldn't just take her somewhere and then deliberately leave her for the rest of her life. So on the Doctor's behalf, I do generally feel like it's sad how Ruby, because she hasn't travelled with the Doctor long according to her, actually thinks this is what the Doctor does. As mentioned, this episode is unlike any other, and I do feel like it includes some things that wouldn't normally be put in Doctor Who, for me at least. Like when Ruby's mum says, men doing things in sheds that women shouldn't know about. And then there's some sort of subliminal message and sort of hidden sort of story behind Marty and sort of the abuse she was receiving from Roger Ap Gwilliam. So I feel like these are fairly sort of adult, dark things that sort of mentioned in Doctor Who, especially the Roger thing, which is quite unusual because it is a family show. So again, this is making this episode feel more different than the other episodes we'd normally receive from Doctor Who. But generally, that's a really good thing. This is the first time in the series we actually see Mrs. Flood as well, being a nosy, annoying neighbour, but to Ruby this time. Now, considering we're halfway through the series and this is her first appearance, I don't feel like we're going to see much more of her, and I do think that we're going to find out more about Mrs. Flood herself in the second season, because I feel like there's a lot going on with Susan Twist at the moment. I feel like Mrs. Flood is going to be another one in the second season. Ruby also really does go through the ringer in this episode because she drops her phone on the hard tarmac floor, being so distressed. And I feel like with Ruby's foster mum, we've seen probably more of her being horrible than actually being nice. First in Christmas when the timeline changed, and then the second time just now when she sort of turned against Ruby. So I feel like I've seen her mum more horrible to her than not. A brilliant addition to this episode was the appearance of Kate. Now, unfortunately, it was sport beforehand, but if it wasn't, it would have been such a great surprise. But having Kate in this episode itself was really great, and to have her interact with Ruby for the first time without the Doctor. Now, it was great to have Kate because you do feel like Ruby's generally safe, generally going to get some answers about who this woman is and where the Doctor is, and then, of course, Kate turns her back on Ruby, and then again you just really feel for Ruby. So I do like how that happened as well, because you feel like she's safe, and then once again Ruby gets let down, which is such a shame. There were some great sort of things mentioned in the scene as well, like the Sontaran reference. I feel like this is the first sort of reference to any previous monster since this season began, so that was really cool to sort of link it back to the past. And then as well, there were some great things mentioned about supernatural themes and sort of how there's more supernatural things in the Doctor universe now. So it's nice how sort of Kate and Unit are noticing that as well. And then them having sort of like necklaces in case of salt, in case of witchcraft again, linking back to those supernatural themes, which are really cool. And then there was some other great things mentioned in that episode itself as well, in that certain scene. like the Doctor sort of being gone and them having to look after Earth on its own and them sort of doing it by the skin of their teeth. Again, all these sort of things were sort of nice things to be sort of mentioned. And it's nice to see UNIT actually look after the Earth and see that they can actually manage without the Doctor on the whole. I thought it was also clever of Ruby to make sure she never actually goes on a plane or a boat in this scene either, just in case killing that woman might kill her, or even though this woman's sort of stalking Ruby, Ruby sort of still has a conscience for this woman. So that was nice to see, and the ending of the scene was really cool as well, when Ruby smashes down the glass and the waitress says "Oi," and then Ruby's like, "Yeah, I know." Again, it just showing Ruby's frustration, and I like how they sort of filmed it from a distance as well. Yeah, I just really loved it all, and it was just done brilliantly. Now, I think they did the best that they possibly could, but with Millie Gibson herself only being 18, it is quite difficult to make her look 40 years old. They did their best. She looked older, but I wouldn't say she looked 40. But originally, I liked how they done this, because at first when they sort of went to 2025 and she met Kate, I thought this was going to be another Rose situation, where they travel a year in advance, then we go from there. But when she started sort of getting aging, then you realise that this is going sort of way beyond than it should, and I really like how they do that, because you start to wonder, well, what's going to happen in the end. So again, I like how they done that, but aging Ruby herself, they did their best, but I think it's quite obvious she's not 40 years old. For me, it wasn't only when she sort of met Kate that you thought things were going to get better and you feel happy for her, but it was also when she first saw Roger in the real world in her time. Now, that I really liked, because I thought things were going to get better, she was going to work out how to stop him, and then time would sort of be reversed. But then from there, things only sort of get worse as well. So again, it sort of gets your hopes up, then lets you down. But I feel like it's a great thing in this episode that they do with that. And also, the bed thing as well with the man she was going out with was really funny, because even at that age, she still has the essence of Ruby, and that was really nice to see. Of course, as we know, in this timeline, she didn't travel with the Doctor long, but it's just a great example of Ruby and how great a companion she is. Because even though she didn't travel with the Doctor long, again, she has that essence of being a companion and trying to save the world even without the Doctor. So I feel like this is a great showcase of how great of a companion she actually is. So I really do like how even without the Doctor, and even though all these years have passed, she's still trying to do what the Doctor would have done, and I really love how they've done that. I also sort of wondered to myself, how much would £1,000 be in 2046? Because I feel like by then it wouldn't be a lot. I mean, even nowadays it's starting to turn out like not as much as it used to be. So even though I feel like £1,000 probably isn't a lot in that time, it's still a fair amount to donate. They handled sort of the future quite well as well. I thought it did sort of feel like the future, but I feel like the app thing was on the nose. Now, the thing is, by 2046, will apps have disappeared and be seen as sort of a thing from the old days? Aren't phones or any technology going to have apps on? Maybe it would be like the internet, where you don't have to download them and you could just search them up and they're on your phone. I don't know how it would work, but I feel like the app thing was sort of on the nose to try and make it seem like it is in the future, but I just thought that didn't work as well. But apart from that, the whole sort of future thing was great, and them sort of mentioning the Great Russian War in 2031, I feel like was a great connection, because you see the things that have been happening in the last years, and that is genuinely believable. So things like that I thought they did well, but the apps and it being from the olden days I just thought was a bit too on the nose. As mentioned earlier, this episode does sort of touch upon Roger and sort of who he is and what a vile person he is, with Marty sort of describing him as a monster and Ruby saying he makes her skin crawl, and then Ruby saying, "I'm sorry it took so long and I couldn't help you." And then there sort of being that wild party that Marty was invited to personally. These are all sort of suggested, but you do sort of get the vibe that he is a horrible person, and you can sort of understand what sort of abuse Marty and other people receive from him. So again, it's quite dark theme to sort of touch upon, but I do like how they do it in Doctor Who, because it is sort of subliminal adult themes, but again, I do really like it how they sort of do this thing, because it's sort of in just a little bit sort of tortury thing, and something that you'd see in Torchwood, this sort of theme going on. So I do like how they've touched upon this, again, making it separate from any other episode, refreshing the episode and sort of making it different from anything we've had before, which again is what I do like about this episode. Ruby in the episode was many things. I also feel like she was brave as well as all the others, because I did generally think she was going to get shot, and she was very brave to stop Roger, hearing about the nukes and the sort of codes being given, and then the Doctor's warning all those years ago. So Ruby did well, and she was very brave, because I did feel like she was going to get shot. So again, a nice sort of a high tension scene that I really enjoyed, and Ruby did well again. Talking about the scenes where Ruby was old, I do like how there were flowers left at the TARDIS, and I do wonder, maybe this is past companions sort of showing signs of respect to the Doctor, because who else would be leaving the flowers? So I do like that. And then again, the mentions of the future, the engine needed signal, that was quite a cool touch as well. And then also the sort of nurse telling Ruby that you have to say lights for it to go on. Again, it's sort of showing us that we shouldn't treat the elderly like they're stupid, so I do like those scenes as well. And it's also quite sad how Ruby never actually found her mother, and she never heard about her foster mum died, and how it never snowed again. Again, these sort of sad touches that I do like about the episode, and it's quite odd because normally I don't like sad episodes, but I thought they did it really well, so I did enjoy this one. Then at the end we find out Ruby was the old woman all along, but like everyone else, I have quite a few questions. For example, what was the woman saying? Why did they put the mark down her face if we couldn't see her? Does Ruby remember the other timeline if it's her third time in Wales? Where did the Doctor actually go? What was the woman signing, and is this a clue? The real answer's in Doctor Unleashed. Why 73 yards away? Who or what was behind this? And why did older Ruby originally not stop the Doctor stepping on the circle? A lot of these will never be answered, and I think it's deliberately so. Overall, for me, this was a sad episode, but I did really enjoy it, which is odd for me because I normally don't enjoy the sadder episodes as much. But it was still very enjoyable. Yes, the second time round there aren't no surprises and you do sort of know what's going to happen, but it is still very enjoyable and fun to watch the second time round. So initially I would have ranked it an 8 out of 10, and I'm going to keep it at an 8 out of 10 because it is still a fun watch. But what I'd love to know is what you guys think. What did you think of the episode? Did you enjoy it like me, or weren't you keen on it? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks to everyone who put their voting in the poll as well. Unsurprisingly, the vast majority loved it or liked it, so that's really nice to see that you guys enjoyed it as well. But again, what did you think? Let me know in the comments below. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully see you in my next video soon. Thank you for watching and take care.